Hey everyone, so today I have a very special treat on this channel. I've been doing a lot of silly, more fun political videos lately, but today I am joined by probably one of the most important writers when it comes to topics of American banking and the Federal Reserve. Certainly one of the best books out there on it, The Creature from Jekyll Island, the author G. Edward Griffin. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for that kind introduction.
Oh, of course. Seriously, your book is probably one of the most important things for young people to read, to understand what is going on in this world right now. But speaking of, I do want to ask, what are your current thoughts on the state of politics in the United States right now? The kind of tension between like extreme right-wingers, extreme left-wingers, Antifa, this attack on free speech, and it just seems everyone's so confused with definitions of words. What is even conservative anymore? What is liberal? There's just so much confusion right now in the state of politics. What do you make of it all?
Well, I think that the only way to understand this so-called confusion, because I don't think it really is confusion, I think the confusion is part of the design, if you put those two things together. I think what we're seeing is the unfolding of, I would call it a master plan. It's nothing new. In the old days, we used to study it in history books, and it was called divide and conquer. But today it's called information dominance and different names, but it boils down to the same thing. There is a group of people in the world who have an agenda, and it's not in our best interest. It's a group that really doesn't have a name. Different people call it different things. They call it the powers that be, because we can't really put a handle on it.
The deep state.
The deep state, yeah, or the oligarchy, and all of those words are valid in a sense. But the fact of the matter is, in my view, that there is a group of people that are pretty much running the show behind the scenes, and they're not the ones that we read too much about in the newspapers, and they're not the ones we vote for when we go into the polls. They're these, the hidden forces, the ones which control the money system. If you can control money in the world, you've got a big, long lever, as you can imagine. As Lord Rothschild said a couple of centuries ago, he says, "I care not who passes the laws as long as I have the ability to make the money, because you can buy the politicians and you can pay for the armies that will put the kings on the throne and so forth." So those with really deep pockets, if you want to simplify it, are certainly in that category. And they're not the only ones, by the way, but they're in the category because they can literally buy up nations. And meanwhile, the people are going to the polls and voting for the candidates that have been selected by these more hidden forces, and they think they're participating in their own political destiny, because they vote for candidate A or candidate B, and the candidates are always arguing against each other, so they think, we got a choice here, right? Well, not really, because they agree on very fundamental issues that are important. So this is the long view, the big view, and so the strategy that these people have been using, and I've studied this for a long time, and they're very clear about it. If you get to their documents and their books, and you'll find they're very frank about the way to take over a system is to divide it and to get everybody at each other's throat. And it's the concept of us against them. And if you can get violence in the streets, the communists were masters of this in the day of communist revolutions and so forth. They have written textbooks on this, and I studied those as a young guy. I was really curious about how these things work, and they say go into a country, and if we're interested in taking over that country from the inside, so the way you do it is you look for something where there is a potential division. Now, in some countries it might be religion. There might be a great clash of religion in some area. Right. In others it might be racial. In others it might be economic status. Whatever it is, let's find what it is, and we will try and go into both sides, and we will agitate one side against the other, and until finally if we generate violence ourselves, we'll actually hire people who are experts at this, but also we'll use inflammatory propaganda so that we'll bring out of the woodwork people who are innocent. And we see this going on right now in America today. The left versus the right, there's no difference between them. And you look who's financing these people. I think we were talking a moment ago about there's a demonstration or a protest coming up, and Antifa is busing in people from all over the country. Well, who's paying for these buses, you say?
Right.
This is not a grassroots movement. This is funded, this is orchestrated, this is theater. And the idea is that if you can get the left fighting the right, or they think they're left and right and so forth because they've been told, or some white nationalists who are fed up with being told that they're hateful people, and they don't like all of the privileges given to these violent black groups and so forth, funded by George Soros. They think that's not fair. How come these people can get away with violence and hatred, and they call us the haters, and so they get mad? They really get ticked off. And so this is the trick. They're trying to get people from both sides, the genuine people, fooled and angered and blinded by passion and hatred, and now we really have a race war, you see. But it wouldn't never have happened if it hadn't been orchestrated and financed and strategized from the very beginning. So when you ask me the question, what's my take on it, I see this merely as the continuation of this strategy that has been known by political scientists for a long time. This is nothing new. It's nothing mysterious. You can go to any well-stocked library and get books on this strategy, you see. So it's coming to the point now, though, where I think we're reaching, there's the final phase in this thing is called consolidation. That's what they call it. And the consolidation phase comes when finally the population is so frightened and so fed up by this violence, which they think is genuine. They think the whole country has gone crazy, when in fact it's 0.0000001%, you know, but orchestrated and always doing their theater performance in front of cameras. That's so that the vision to the rest of the country is that this is everywhere. And so with 5,000-10,000 people, you can make it look like it's a national revolution. And so the idea is to get the poor bloke at home, drinking his beer and watching his television or whatever he drinks, maybe it's tea, and he says, "Hey, Myrtle, look at this. This country's coming apart. I mean, they're going to be in our streets pretty soon." So now everybody's set up. If there is a real clash and some real blood in the streets, these same groups who have their people in government as well will say, "Well, we're going to declare martial law. We're going to put an end to this violence." And unfortunately, so many people are going to say, "Oh, thank goodness we have martial law," because this they see as restoring peace. Well, once the martial law is in place, that's the consolidation.
Right.
That's when there is no even a question of free speech.
It's interesting because I just did a video on this recently about Theresa May. Her response to the recent failed terrorist attack in a subway that injured 30. Well, I guess it wasn't necessarily failed, but the bomb was a kind of a flop. But her response was, "Let's censor the internet. That's what we need to do. We need to get the powers that be together to censor the internet." And she didn't just say terrorism. She said extremists. But what is an extremist? Who decides who these extremists are?
Well, the extremists, in my view, are the ones who would censor the internet. Those are the extremists, you see. And that she and others are playing right into the trap, the strategy I'm talking about. If you have enough violence on the subways or on the streets or whatever it is, people are frightened and we'll have the government clamp down on those people, not realizing that they themselves are the real target for this clampdown.
Now, I want to go back to talking about this kind of idea that there's this ominous group of people controlling everything. And I like many, I had hope in this election with Trump. I was like, he's going to disrupt it, drain the swamp, I was really excited. He pissed off all the right people.
Right.
And still, to this day, I enjoy watching just the MSNBC people foaming at the mouth, right? It's entertaining.
That's fun.
But there's certainly a lot of disappointment coming from people, especially the anti-war crowd and such, that are saying, "Oh, he's going into the Middle East. He's sending bombs to Syria. There are a lot of the swamp. Bannon's being kicked out. The swamp isn't totally being drained. What's going on here, right?"
There are a lot of reptiles still there in the White House, even.
Right, and it makes them think maybe Trump is an honest, genuine guy that did want to disrupt and change things, but there are these people pushing buttons and controlling things behind the scenes that are making it so that can't happen, so changes can't be made. But when you talk about this, you sound a bit like a conspiracy theorist. How would you address that?
Well, first of all, I'm not afraid of the word conspiracy theorist. I know that's just a tactic to frighten people. Oh, I don't want people calling me names, and so I will just shut up. That's what that's all about.
Right.
That's a whole other thing. It doesn't work so much, I don't think, anymore. It doesn't bother me. And if the people want to talk about conspiracies, let's just talk about conspiracy. I mean, all the major events of history have been driven by conspiracies. Conspiracies are probably one of the most common social features of our existence. If you go to any courtroom today and you just sit there and watch the trials that are going on there, I'm going to guess 40% of them are dealing with conspiracies of one kind. Conspiracies are a fact of life. And, conspiracies are just simply when two or more people get together to do something that's either immoral or illegal, and they do it in secret. Well, that's done all the time. So anybody says the conspiracy theory is though conspiracies don't happen. Well, they've just never read a history book. That's all. But and of course, the temptation for doing things in secret that are illegal or immoral, that temptation rises as the stakes go higher. In other words, if there's a lot of money, the old joke: why do thieves rob banks? The answer is because that's where the money is. Well, as the pile of money gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it's more temptation to go rob the bank. So as the rewards of conspiracy get bigger and bigger, there's more temptation for a conspiracy, and there's no bigger reward than at the government. At the government level, that's where all the taxes come in. That's where all the power is. If you can capture control of that power center, the government itself, well, that's the ultimate golden age. So all crooks are anxious to get involved in that. They want to steal the golden egg. So the temptation is infinite. So and people say, well, that's our government. You'd never have any bad people in government, would you? I mean, it's idiocy. So I don't even want to deal with that one. But back to your main point, which I've already forgotten now. You got me off on conspiracy. But what was that one?
Well, I'm curious how you would kind of explain or describe the powers that be, because we all talk about them in this big honest. And I have an idea that exists as well, because there has to be someone behind the scenes. Even in my own life, like companies I've worked for, there's been people behind me saying, say this, and I've had to piece it because of that. There's always something trying to influence it, and it's hard to explain to people, especially when you can't specify.
Well, that's because people don't read books. If somebody wants any evidence of a conspiracy or a secret society or something like that, all they have to do is go to their bookstore and find a couple of books written by Professor, Carol Quigley, who wrote Tragedy and Hope, is most famous. It's a big, thick book, it's even thicker than mine. It's a better doorstop than mine is, and it's dull reading, but it'll blow your mind, because Professor Quigley was a very well-known and renowned professor at Georgetown University, historian. He was the kind of the mentor of Bill Clinton, and when Clinton was elected, he, in a couple of speeches afterwards, he gave public acknowledgement to Professor Quigley for having been a great influence in his life and so forth. Well, Quigley wrote this book about the most successful conspiracy in the world, and it's going on right now. If you just go read Quigley's book, he says, I have no aversion to it. This is Quigley speaking. He says, this organization has existed. It was formed by Cecil Rhodes, over a century ago. Didn't have a name. They chose not to give it a name so people couldn't talk about it. And it was a real conspiracy. And Quigley says it's the most powerful force in the world today. He says this in his book. He says, I've looked at their secret papers. They've allowed me in because he was their historian. They wanted him to write their history, never dreaming that the book would get out and people like you and I might actually read it, because it was just to be for them, to record what great accomplishments they had made. So you just start with that, and then take a look at structures that are easily recognizable today. Quigley talks about the creation of something called the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, the Council on Foreign Relations is a real organization. It has a building in New York. You can go visit it. You can go take pictures of it. You got a list of members and everything. So it's what you call semi-secret. And but they do a lot of things that they don't want the public to know about. But you take a look at the membership list, and there's about 4,400 members, I think, in that range. It's not a very big organization, 4,000 people. A lot of churches in some large cities have memberships greater than that. But look at the list, and you'll find that every one of those people on that list are key executives. They're presidents of the United States, they're senators, they're congressmen, members of the Supreme Court, they're heads of the CIA, heads of the generals in the military, they're head of the FBI, there's the Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, they're the head of their universities, the presidents of universities, heads of labor unions. They own or are key executives for the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, Time Magazine, Look Magazine, ABC, CBS, NBC, Turner. I mean, it'll just blow your mind. And there's the list, you see. All of these people are literally the hidden rulers of this country because they direct public opinion and political policy. And yet you don't even hear about them. Now, the interesting thing is, if you're curious and you're skeptical about this thing, go look at the Council on Foreign Relations and see what they stand for. Well, they'll tell you. They stand for global government based on the model of collectivism, which means the end of the United States. Mm-hmm. They don't say the end of the United States, but global government, everybody says, well, that's wonderful, that's peace. But no, it's not necessarily peace. It's because it's not just any global government, it's government based on the principles of collectivism, which is all-powerful government, all power at the top and the people at the bottom serving the state. That's what they advocate. And so you ask me, is this a conspiracy theory? No, it's a conspiracy fact.
Right.
And you can document it without even having to go any further than your library.
It's really interesting. It gets to this point where it becomes so much crazy information that one mind can barely even process it. I've looked into some of this stuff, and yeah, a lot of their agendas are quite public. And when you talk about this Council of Foreign Relations and all the people on it, you can read that. It's public, it's there. And to think people wouldn't consider that rich people would get together and try to plan together to make more money is just insane to me, and that would be a conspiracy is crazy. But sometimes I feel like it's so complicated and so big that people don't even want to acknowledge it. They don't even want to take on that behemoth, because it would take away our whole perception of reality in the world. This whole idea of we vote, we have a say in our democracy, we've got good, honest people telling us what to believe on TV, they're telling us the truth. If you take all that away, I mean, so many people's foundations are just totally destroyed, and I don't think they could even cope with that.
Well, that's true. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, I have some very good friends, as a matter of fact. We get along just fine until we get on to really important topics. As long as we're talking about the weather, or who won the latest football game, or who's the best dancer on Dancing with the Stars, or something like that, we're fine. We can talk about general principles. But once you start getting into these things, which chip away at the foundation of their comfort zone, their security, because they want to think that they're in this nice big luxury ship, and the ship is well built and the captain is trustworthy. They don't want to think it's going to go crashing into an iceberg because the captain is drunk or whatever. They don't want to think that maybe the captain really has sold out and the ship is going to a prison island. They don't want to think any of that. So they refuse to listen. And that used to bother me a lot, and it still does, by the way. But there's an offsetting and comforting thought to that. And that is that these people don't really matter that much. And I hate to say it because it makes me sound like an elitist, but that's not my point. My point is, history has always been written by 1% of the population. Those are the movers and shakers. And the other 99%, they're more interested in their daily lives and their affairs, and they will follow whichever side wins. In all major conflicts in history, you'll find that if there's been a real conflict, there's 1% on one side, 1% on the other side, and they fight it out. And whichever side wins, then they write the history. And the other 99% pretty much just say, well, yeah, I was always on that side.
Right.
Yeah. So we come to the question of what to do about this. And just being aware of it doesn't amount to very much. It's necessary to be aware, of course. Without awareness, without facts, we'll make wrong decisions. But no, let's say we know all of these things. What do we do about it? We've got to reach for recapture control of our political and our social system. We can't just sit on our couches and say, my, look what's happening. We have to do, in a way, we have to do what our opponents have done. I mentioned a moment ago, they have a strategy. What's our strategy? We need a strategy, don't we? You can't fight a war unless you have a strategy, especially if you're fighting a war against an army which is well disciplined, well funded, and they've got a mission and all of that sort of thing. And you stand around and say, well, you can't do that to me. I don't like what you're doing. You know, I don't like tyranny, and that you think that's enough. No, you have to have a strategy. You have to have people coming together. You need a 1%, in other words, who know what they want and work together to bring it about.
Right.
And that's why I created this thing called Freedom Force International. That's the 1%. And we're building it right now. So we're not just complaining. I think, the issue is, what are you going to do about it? Well, let's study what our opponents are doing. We can't imitate them. We don't want their ethics. We don't want their goals. But they're pretty brilliant when it comes to strategy. When you have two armies fighting each other, let's say your army versus your enemy's army, you better look at what your enemy's doing, because if he's outsmarting you, you better figure out a way to outsmart him, or else you're going to lose. So that's my answer. I don't worry too much about the guy next door pushing his lawnmower and saying, don't talk to me about that stuff, because I know he's out of it anyway. So I'm looking for you and for others who really care.
Right. I just have one last question for you here, and that is, what would you say is the best strategy? I know you've created your Freedom Force thing, but just for the viewers right now, in a simple way, what is the best strategy to fight these powers that be, especially when it's so hard to define them?
Okay, now it's hard to keep this short because...
Oh, go ahead, no problem.
It can be a problem. People go to sleep and batteries run out on cameras. But the strategy, as I said before, is we have to sort of meet them on the same ground that they're working. Well, what does that mean? If you look at what's happening in the U.S. today, they've got these little stormtroops that they move around the country. We know it's Antifa. The same people show up here, and so forth. But they have organizations all around the country, little grassroots organizations, which are funded by these same powers that be. There's a lot of money going to these groups. I was talking with a fellow up in Washington State recently, where we're trying to, and in fact we already are creating our unit of our own, but he said, here we live out in the boonies, it's out here in this little country county, and he said, they've got a headquarters right here, a paid headquarters with the telephone and internet connection and a bookstore and everything. And I don't know what the population of the town is, but maybe it's 5,000 people. And somebody's paying for that organization to be there, and they show up at all the town meetings, and they're always doing something to get into the news, the little local news and so forth. And it's a little group. Well, I think I'm going to cut short now to the point. We need little grassroots organizations like that all over the country that have the mission of liberty, not collectivism, but liberty, individual rights and freedom. And how do you build that now is the strategy. We know what we want to do. So we have to reach out to this middle ground between the 99 and the 1%. And so we have created something called the Red Pill University. And we were hoping that it would have sort of a popular appeal to bring in people who don't want to think about conspiracies, but just talk about maybe there's an illusion that we're all living under, you know? It's because of the movie, The Matrix. And lo and behold, it kicked in wonderfully. Everybody likes it. They want to go to the Red Pill University and see what all these illusions are. So it's more of a gentle way of getting into the same subject matter, and it's working. So if a person has this urge to want to sort of put their nose under the tent and see what a little struggle for freedom feels like, let's go build these local campuses for freedom, for Red Pill University. And so I'm just going to, if I may make a plug, if anybody wants, I've written a little report on what we're doing on that. Just go to redpilluniversity.org, and there'll be a place to put your email address, and I'll send you my report on that. And I hope you like it. You know? I think it's the answer.
And this is something like talking about that little group in your friend's town. I mean, Project Veritas revealed some of that, where they spoke to the organizers who are literally paying mentally challenged individuals to start fights at Trump rallies. It's insane. This is documented stuff. Once again, it's very scary. So, And they have massive funding, just massive funding. So getting young people, anyone who is interested in liberty, doing the same thing from a non-corruptive perspective, where they're not paying mentally ill people to start fights, but instead going there and spreading the message of liberty, is a very, very fantastic idea, I think.
They've got the money, but we've got the people.
And the truth, I think.
And the truth. Well, that's why we have it. That's why we have the people. Yeah. Nobody has to pay us to do this, whereas those people, either they're making money on it, they wouldn't show up if they didn't have that paycheck coming in, most of them, or they have some other goal where they figure they're going to be benefited in some way, political power or something like that.
Mm-hmm. The scary part is obviously the ground troops who either are getting money or have been so indoctrinated by school systems and media to genuinely believe they're fighting Hitler again, or to genuinely believe they're fighting Voldemort.
And they are Hitler. And they are Hitler. They've become that and don't even know it.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this interview. I really, really appreciate it. And everyone, be sure to check out redpill.org.
Well, it's redpilluniversity.
redpilluniversity.org. And where else can people find your work and follow you?
Well, okay. Our commercial site is realityzone.com. That's where we have all the books and the videos and the audios, the educational materials. Mm-hmm. We have over 100 different items there on this and similar topics. So that's realityzone.com. And then Freedom Force itself has its own website. That's our think tank, where we have nothing to sell, just ideas, things like what we're talking about here. And that's freedomforceinternational.org. So we got all this stuff going on. And then, we also have a newsletter, a news service called needtoknow.news. So we got plenty to keep you occupied.
Perfect. I'll try to get those and put them in the description so people can easily go down and click that. But thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Be sure to hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.